Hello, welcome back. So in this chapter 9.2, we're going to go and talk about how to present quantitative data graphically. So a teacher records the score on the 20-point quizzes for 13 students in his class. The scores are displayed below. The scores are summarized in the frequency table by grouping like the value. So now let's do it again. So how do we group in the value? So it's a little bit unrealistic for us to just count everyone, like every scored without grouping, such as we want to count how many 19 students got 19. We have 19, 19, 119, and so it's 319, right? The frequency of 19 and 3. So you might end up to have like 20 categories, right? So that's a little bit hard. What would we do? There's two ways to do it. One, you just like counting every student, or you can group it, such as student getting from 0, you can say into 4 categories. Student who's getting 0 to 5, and student who's scoring 10 to 15, not 10 to 15, of course, 5 to 10, and then 10 to 15 and 15 to 20. You can separate into 4 groups, or you can just do it a really detailed way. It depends on how big is the data. So if you're recording like 200 students, so maybe you do it, maybe each student will have each point, then you may need to have 20 entries. But if you separate into 4 groups, you may end up to have just 4 entries. But in this case, since we only have how many students? Just 13 students, so let's count it one by one. It shouldn't be hard. So 0, score 0, we have each time when you count it, the way to do it is just cross it, so you don't repeatedly count it. So you have a 2, for the next would be 5, you have 1 student who got 5 points, and then I'm going to pause the video and count it by myself. You can also do it by yourself. Okay, I just done counting. I hope you're done as well. So here's the result. So I count every single student and use the individual each, like mark it by 1. The unit, the distance will be 1. And then here is the frequencies table. So after the frequency table, it would be possible to create a standard bar chart from this summary, like what we did in the last video, which is for the categorical data. So here is the frequency bar. It's the same. You can also hand draw in it or use the Google Sheets to do it. So, however, since these score are numerical data and the chart doesn't really make sense, the first and second bar are 5 values apart, while the neighbor bars are 1 value apart. It would be more correct to treat the horizontal axis as a number 9. So this part of graph is called histogram. So the difference is, this bar chart or column chart, that's what Google calls it. When it comes to numerical data, which is quantitative data, we call it histogram. When it comes to categorical data, we call it bar chart. But essentially, they're the same. Okay, so from the above value, a histogram would look like this way because we treat it like a number 9. So that's why you still have students between 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and the 7, 6, 9, 10. This one, even though no one got that score, you're supposed to be still neighbor it. Okay, so you might notice that in the histogram, the bars represent the value on the horizontal axis from the one on the left-hand side to the bar up, but not including. So for example, in this one, for the first one, you're only including the value left-handed, which is 0. Let me erase the bar, which is 0, but not including 1. 1 is not included. So also some people, this is called left-hand side rule. So always would become the left-hand side. But some people would choose to have the bar started at the 1/2 value to avoid the ambiguous, such as they will draw it like, I'm going to do it here. So here's the frequency, like say 2, 4, 6. And this is a 0, 1, 3, 4, 5, 6. So in order to represent the people who score 5, instead of drawing it here, you draw it at the 1/2. I'm going to use a different color pens. Oops. Now I can use the green one back. So you draw it in between, starting at the middle part. So this can avoid the ambiguous. So you know that, hey, this is means score 5. The frequencies of the score 5 represent the score 5. Okay. So the class of interval. The class interval are the is our grouping the data, like we talked about that earlier. Instead of writing this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 data sets, we can group it as like a 4 group. So now let's take a look. So for each interval is equal in size. So that means when you're grouping, let's use the same example. So you know that the highest score is 20. The range should be from 20 to 0 to 20. You can group it like, okay, the first group is from 0 to 10, and then the second group is 10 to 12, and then the third group is 12 to 14, and then the last group is 14 to 20. No, this won't work. They should have the same size, which is maybe you would group it every 5 points. So each interval has a lower limit and upper limit. For interval like 100 to 20, 129, 120 is the lower limit, 129 is the upper limit. So the class width is different. It's the differences between the two consecutive lower limits. The class width is the same for every interval table. Okay. So here is an example. Let's try to do it. So suppose that we're connecting weight from 100 male subjects as part of the nutrition study. And for our weight data, we have value ranges low as 121 pounds to high as 263 pounds. Given the total span is, that's the range, 142, what we can do is we create 7 interval with the width of around 20 pounds, and the 14 interval with the width around 10 or something in between. So that means you can do different category. If you do it like if 100 and the 42 you want to divide it by 7, you will end up to have the differences. The lower limit differences will be 20. If you want to do it as 14, so the lower limit differences, which is class width, that's what they say, would be 10. Okay, oftentimes we have to experience with a few possibility to find out that represented. So let's try something interval with the width of 15. We could start at 121 or 120. So I was starting with 120 because that's a easy and nicer number to do it. So here is the data. I'm going to fill it in. I think I forgot to write down the data. So what I do is each data, the differences would be 15. So technically it should be from 120 to 113.4 because you're including the last data, 113.4. So there are totally 15 data entries. So now we have 139 to 149. Just keep going on. Okay, so here's the data entry. So again, I want to explain why we don't do 113.5. Because when you do 113.5, in here what will you get is 125 and 113.5, and then you're starting 113.5 again and 149. So that will create some ambiguous because what if there's a patient, not patient, there's a participant who weighed 135. So where should you put him? Should you put him at the first group or the second group? So in order to avoid this ambiguous, so we set here is 134 point maybe 9. You can either do 9. That also work. Okay. So for this value bit above, a histogram would look like what? So we can draw it by ourselves again, or you can use a Google Sheet or GeoGebra or Decimal to help you. So when you try to draw it, so the graph should look like here. You don't starting with 0 now, you're starting with 120. And then you're 135. I'm going to fill this up in. Okay, now we can look at our data and start it. Remember the left-hand side rule. So the first group, we have 4 frequencies. So we can draw 4 peoples from here to here. Remember, you don't including the left side, the right side, you're only including from the left side. Represent the data from the left to the right. Okay, the second group have frequencies of 14, which is weighted from 135 to 149.9. 14. And then the next one you have 16, so slightly higher. So you have 16, and then you just continue it. So pause the video, try to do it by yourself. So here is what does the bar chart look like. Also, you can use the same to make a let's talk about the software. So there's an example software, it's a screenshot of software. You can create a similar histogram by putting all the class interval as a label on the bar chart. And also, you can use the bar chart generated by the Google Sheet. We've done it in last video, so I'm not going to go over how to do that on Google Sheets. So there is the data below from a task in which the goal is to move the computer mouse to a target on the screen as fast as possible. On the 20 of the trials, the target was a small rectangle. On the other 20, the target was a large rectangle. The time to reach the target was recorded on each child. So here you have 2 data. One is a reach to a larger target, the other is a smaller target. So how do you represent the data? Since you have 2 different categories, 2 different groups. So one option to represent the data would be use a comparative histogram or bar chart in which the bar of a small target group and the large target group. So here I'm going to use the Google Sheet to show you how to do it. Now I'm going to pause the video and enter the data first. Okay, I just done entering the data. Again, you enter in 3 columns. It will be the same. You highlight the data set that you want. And on top of the bar 2, you choose Insert, Chart, and then choose a column chart, which is a histogram. Then you will get this. As you can see, the red one represents the large target, and the blue one represents the small target. And this is called comparative. So in this chart, it's really intuitive. That tells you, hey, the large target, the most frequent occurs is on 500 to 599 in milliseconds, and for the small target it's quite average, but still distribute like there's a bell curve for the small target. So that is quite interesting. Okay, so there's another one that I want to talk about is called this graph makes it so this graph basically is the chaining graph. It's a frequency of polygon. So the way that you do it is you pick the midpoint, the alternative. So a point is placed at the midpoint of interval at the height equals to the frequency of a midpoint. So in the last video, I think I failed to show you how to do the line chart. So I'm going to show it to you again in here. I think the video stopped recording, or I accidentally hit pause when I tried to do it. Okay, so let's get back to this histogram. So from this histogram on the left, on the right, you will be able to have the setting of the chart editor. So you can choose the chart type in here. So you can choose the line chart. So here you are. You will have the line chart as we want it. You can just switch it around. Oh, I actually don't like this one. So I would prefer that one, and then you can customize it the way that you want it to be, such as put like a data label on it, or put a knot, or put like a square, then you'll have the square, just like the textbook showing. So it's really fun to play around. Of course, you can explore another things, such as a area chart like this. So let me know if you have other questions.